Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, now we're recording. Thanks everyone for joining. Moving forward, I am the new TC chair, so I will be running these meetings. Thank you, G-Man, for the amazing and tireless work you've done in the past 2 years as the TC chair. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy, for stepping up.
Yeah, I will be relying on you while I get used to all of the various commands and buttons I have to click and how to do things. And thanks for reminding me today and yesterday for a few things that I had already forgotten. And also a welcome to James, who is the new TC member. Congratulations and welcome. And let me get my notes. And also for Amy, Brian, me, and Slavak for getting re-elected to the TC. Thanks for volunteering again. It's great that we didn't have to rely on lowering the number of TC members or some other voodoo magic. So thank you so much for stepping up. And with that, let's move forward. So following up on past action items. Let's see, what were the past action items? Is there a place where you used to track them, G-Man? I am not entirely sure where you used
if you go to the, I'll paste the link. If you go to the previous meeting log, and there you can have the list of action items, like this one. So there it will be recorded. So every time we put the action item with action command, it will be like recorded here. So I had this action item, for graded skip upgrade job data. So I've not done yet. I was busy for Tempest release and all, but I'll look into this in this or next week early. So basically, this is just to provide what all project have the graded skip level jobs and increase other projects also to start doing it. For 2023.2, they don't need to run because that is non-slur as a mandatory. But for 2024.1, they should be preparing as a mandatory voting job.
And so Nova is going to try to run basically this job anyway to keep us honest unless we break something. I think I will maybe suggest that Glance try to do it as well, because I don't think that there's really anything that's going to break them normally on that stuff. So I mean, I think it would be fine if other projects want to opt into this, but I'm trying to work out the bumps right now because Jamie threw us a couple of extra things we have to do, but yeah, I agree that it needs to be voting for the next round, but it would be great if some of the other projects want to opt in as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Even like if something is like breaking an upgrade in non-slur and we don't currently, at least we will get to know and we can mention in the release notes or something.
Right.
That's good.
I mean, yeah, I mean, even if you disable the job or make it non-voting or whatever halfway through, you've just found your first, breaking change, so that it's good for knowing what to avoid during a Slurp release, as well as knowing what to put in your release notes. So
cool.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So the action item here is to create an Etherpad with the instructions for how projects can do this, to have that be in place in a non-voting manner for the following cycle, and then to have it be required for the cycle coming afterwards, which is a Slurp release. Is that correct?
Well,
Yes.
Nova's
So-
going to have it voting, at least initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
So
G-Man, you,
what we can do, like we put the recommendation, like, okay, for slurp to slurp, it is mandatory and voting, it has to be. And this is how like NOAA is doing for non-slurp also, which will help this way. So project can also try for non-slurp also.
Yeah.
So G-Man,
Sorry, can you hear me? I'm not sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
go ahead.
just saying. So for the moment we have changes for Nova. So what we can help is that to provide the changes for the other projects if they want, so they can understand how they can be doing that. That being said, I mean, for us, it's a bit different than maybe other for other projects. At least for us, we're trying to verify whether you can use different like yoga computes with other stuff. But yeah, basically, let's say if I mean if Nova can help out with that, surely I can help.
so G-Man, the plan, I was assuming that we're going to leave the grenade skip level job alone and have that be the one that people can just have always enabled. Once we enable it, they can have it always enabled, and we control whether it runs by the branches list.
Yeah.
And then we'll have this other job, which I've been calling continuous, but we can call it opt-in
No.
or whatever. And that one will track not just the slurp releases, but n and n-2. And you can have that enabled if you want it.
Yeah. Yes.
Does that sound good? Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that if you can put it as a base job in Granite, that will be helpful, because
That's
those
fine.
2 tweaks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just started it in Nova, but we can just move it to Grenade if you're cool with that before we.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful for the
Okay.
projects. And we will get to know, we'll remember, like while doing the Granite branch, all the tweaks we need to do. So we'll make sure like this job is open for running on all the branch wherever people want.
So the
So will
existing
there-
skip level job, which we have now, for example, Neutron, non-voting, shouldn't be run on the
Yes.
master branch after on basically on 2023.2.
Yes. So
Okay.
that will not be running, but you'll have an option of running
Mhm.
the job what Dan Smith is saying, so that you can prepare and run as voting or non-voting, depends on project.
So Slavik, do you think that you would do that as well? Opt in until it basically opt in to running that until it breaks?
I think, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I mean,
All right.
for skip level job, we do have it already. We run it as non-voting in Antelope, not in the current cycle.
Mhm.
So yeah, we will probably opt
Keep
into
going.
to this. Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect.
It's always nice to set the bar and then have everybody like want to exceed the bar. So that's good.
Yeah, I'll prepare the Etherpad and put it on the channel so that we all can review and how instruction we wanted to put. So I'll
Cool.
continue
So-
the action item.
Makes sense. Moving on. Too many tabs. So gate health check. I already did the welcoming new and returning TC members in the beginning. So any updates on the gate?
Well, it's still timeouts, and a couple of days ago, I guess it was Monday, when there were intramurals issue, which just added instability kind of. But yeah, it was quite fixed quite fast. So, but still, we do have some timeouts from time to time. At least I see them.
Yeah, but I mean, timeouts aren't the only problem that we were having. I mean, the timeouts have definitely gone down, but I still am seeing them for sure. So I'm not sure if my other one got merged, but I spent a bunch
live
of time.
migration one.
Yeah, I spent a bunch of time fixing Cinder tests that have really been biting us for a long time, but okay, it did merge. Have been biting us for a long time, but they kind of like ebb and flow. Not really sure why. But anyway, both of those have now merged, and as soon as the first one merged, I saw like a huge drop in the number of cases where we were hitting that detach thing, and then there was one more in the live migration tests that was the same problem but wasn't getting the same change applied, and so that one just merged yesterday. So I assume that that's really only affecting Cinder, Glance, and Nova, because I think Slavic said that they don't, or someone said that like Neutron doesn't run those tests.
Yeah.
But
Do
that
you have a link to the patch? I'm just curious.
patch is, yeah. I mean, at least the first one I was discussing with you at one point, although I'm not sure where. That's the second one, and then this one is the first one. But basically, it's I mean, it's a real problem. Like, it's something is wrong. It's just that we're failing to detach, basically, and the issue is that we ask the guest to detach, and the guest isn't able or won't let go of the volume. And that's after a live migration or after a live snapshot or whatever. Like, we've clearly done something to the volume to make the guest unhappy about it, but like, it's Ceros, so it doesn't have all of the same like UDEV stuff and all of the same ACPI stuff and whatever. It's not all the time. The guest doesn't seem to have crashed, at least the cases that I've checked, and so we're failing in cleaning up the test. Like, the test has already passed. It's already tested the thing that we want to test. It's just that we can't clean it up because we detach and it doesn't detach. So I just made this not fail the teardown of the test if we can't detach, because the next thing that we do is immediately destroy the guest. Like, that's the next step in the thing, is destroy the guest without flushing data. Like, it's anyway, it's a workaround, but at least it means that we're not just like failing all the time on detach.
Cool. And this failure is affecting other projects as opposed to just Cinder, correct?
Well, I'm
Yes.
fixing it because it affects Nova. But yeah, well, I guess the live migration test maybe is technically a Nova test, but the one that's failing the most was the Cinder test, that as a part of testing its volume, it spins up an instance and tries to attach a volume to it. And so Cinder runs that, Nova runs that, Glance runs that. Anybody that runs the you know, kind of a fairly full run of Tempest will hit it.
Yeah, I think Keystone runs full Tempest, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think,
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I asked some Neutron person if they run these. I can't remember if that was you.
Yeah,
Flock, or
Yeah.
not,
Neutron doesn't run storage like Cinder, or I think
Mhm.
Glance test too. That's how
Okay.
they stopped. Like, they used to get a lot of failures on those, and Neutron said, like, let's not run.
I was going to suggest we take that route too, but it seemed a little unfair. But yeah. So anyway, I mean, it's not the greatest solution, but like, based on my surveying of the log stash, I mean, life has gotten a lot better since that. So.
But we do run tests related to Nova. So, for example, if you fixed some live migration test, yeah, it will improve our gate stability also.
Well, it's only if you run the live migration tests on a job that has Cinder enabled.
Okay. So
that you would have applied this, yeah.
So I would need to check. I'm not sure.
So the other thing that I did recently also was the MySQL memory reduction, and I haven't seen any failures that I haven't seen that make anything worse. So I tend to kind of think that we should either flip that to be the default or try to get more people to run that. But basically it reduces some key buffers and per connection buffers and things in MySQL that cause in my testing the memory footprint of MySQL to drop by about half. And so on jobs that are already memory constrained, that I mean MySQL is the biggest memory user in the job, and so that makes a pretty big difference. So like on the Ceph job, which is a really heavyweight job, it went from 850 meg to a little under 400 meg at the end of the test with that stuff. So.
And flip, you mean like the stack variable itself, right? So that it will be.
I mean, yeah, I guess I haven't gone to look to see how many ooms we're hitting not in the Ceph job since we merged that. So I mean, I could try to do that if you want, but I mean, it also, unless it's hurting performance, it also seems like it will just improve, you know, behavior in general. So I don't know. I guess I'm not.
Also, let's wait for this release. Maybe this maybe it will be just couple of weeks, and after that we can flip, which will be a good timing to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, seems like a good thing to have if it's making that big of a change to memory usage.
Yeah, I mean, it could make things worse in that if MySQL goes way slower, you hit the timeout, right? But I just haven't seen that, and so. But anyway, if we wait till after the release and then just enable it and see what catches fire, I mean, I think that's a totally reasonable thing to do. And even if we don't, I mean, being able to enable it in jobs that, you know, are very heavy, like the Ceph job, like we've already done, you know, is also fine. But
cool. Makes sense. Anything else on gate health?
Do you have a link to that patch, Dan, your MySQL patch?
Yes.
Thanks.
Oh, that's actually not it. That is, that enables it, but I think it depends on, it depends on the patch, so you can follow it from there. So we enabled that in the Nova Ceph multi-store job, which was where we were like really having a lot of trouble. So if you have a job that you want to enable it in, that's the flag.
Yeah, I saw one of those recently, but I can't remember whether it was a Ceph job or not.
I think that we only enabled it for Ceph in Nova, not anyone that runs that job. So you might still be running it without that.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I've done, barely keep track of all of this stuff lately, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that for Ironic because we're always memory constrained. So thanks.
Okay. Yeah, but you might be not memory constrained for the same reason, depending on what all you're running. But yeah, I mean, if MySQL is the thing that usually gets killed by the killer, then this is probably.
Our primary pressure in Ironic CI is managing the bloating size of distributions and RAM disks, and so having to make the RAM in our fake hardware larger, which then gives us less RAM for the services. So it's just a trade-off.
Yeah, it just depends on, regardless of your memory pressure, if MySQL is the thing that the killer usually picks poorly to kill to make room, then this, you know, will probably shrink it down a little bit. Like it got it close to some of the other candidates even, which, you know, it doesn't matter what it kills, it's still going to break everything. But yeah, anyway.
All right, moving on to the next topic, which is the uWSGI alternative. And if we should define a WSGI standard server in PTI. So there are links to mailing list discussion about WSGI going into maintenance mode. Amy is also complaining that she cannot get back in. due to connection issues. That's unfortunate. I pasted links in chat to the UWSGI discussion on the mailing list.
Just to level set, can we be explicit about what the current place is? Do we currently dictate a WSGI server of UWSGI, or is that just commonly used by different projects?
No, we don't have anything fixed, and some projects use actually GUnicorn instead of UWSGI. So it's different all over the place. Some use mod WSGI from Apache, so it's really a mess, and we don't have any like standard for that. And
Well,
I feel this is been as biggest problem, kind of, because basically we can't tell, or we don't have any established standard, first of all, and we don't say, okay, well, all OpenStack projects does test this way, and you as a user or as operator can safely, yeah, choose some option.
well, I believe that all of the non-standalone WSGI usage in our CI is UWSGI, right? I don't think we have any mod WSGI.
No, but we have mod GUnicorn or GUnicorn according to some replies in the mailing list.
No, I'm saying in our CI, I think that everything that's not a standalone eventlet is running under UWSGI, right? So
Yeah,
we do have a this is what we test with precedent. So I think that that's reasonable. I also think that like we should aim to not tie ourselves to one too tightly. Like I'm, you know, people have various reasons for running any of them, right? Like I believe that a lot of Red Hat stuff, even though we test all on UWSGI, runs under mod WSGI. So, and that works. So I feel like operators probably have a WSGI container that they want, you know, they have a reasonable reason for picking one of them other than just this is the one that I have to use. So without any like strong reason why we need to pick one, I'd like us to just be a WSGI app and you'll be able to run underneath what you want, with the caveat that we have to test something, and right now we test UWSGI.
Yeah, but then it shouldn't be a problem to place something into testing interface, right? Because basically it's already kind of established then.
I am.
But I believe other question if we should continue to use UWSGI in DevStack, because yeah, we don't know how.
Yeah, but as people have said, like it's not like completely gone, and it has a huge installed base, and like I feel like we, you know, it's maybe a harbinger of doom, but that doom may never come. Someone might pick it up. It may become a problem in the future. Right now, it's not a problem, I think.
Yeah, that's sort of where I was going to go with it. Is I sort of think that no action is the correct action here, because it seems like this is shaking it out pretty well without us dictating anything. UWSGI's not going away. I mean, if they maintain it for security profiles and stuff like that, that seems fine. Like we can monitor that separately. And I don't want us to accidentally cause work for projects that, you know, may be testing under a standalone eventlet server and now feel like they need to go UWSGI or something like that, or carving out exceptions for HTTP servers that might be in temporary RAM disks like IPA or some of the stuff. I think the Amphoras might run a WSGI service in it too. Like there's just, it's one of those things of like leaving the complexity. So the projects has worked out pretty well so far, and I think we should keep that.
Well, the only caveat.
Yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say the only caveat to that, I think, is that I think that it's fine for DevStack to say, this is, you know, we're going to use UWSGI and DevStack because we've got the machinery for it. We understand it, you know, it's there, right? And so like if you're going to run as a WSGI service, in DevStack, we're going to run you this way. But beyond that, I don't think that we need to dictate anything, and certainly not a shift away from UWSGI at this point. That would be my opinion.
And in a lot of cases, the documentation that we provide is based on the UWSGI configuration for Apache, at least on Keystone specifically, and configuring single sign-on and things that depend on Apache plugins. I guess my other concern would be depending on UWSGI features. I know that UWSGI has a Python module that you can import into your code and start depending on fancy UWSGI things. I don't want us to realize that we are depending on things that cannot work outside of UWSGI. But otherwise, I don't think that like it's a huge problem. I know that before we went with UWSGI, we used to do mod WSGI. Like I distinctly remember that. So.
Sure. I think that I mean, I'm pretty sure that there are already projects that import the UWSGI module and use it. Because there are things that you can't do otherwise, graceful shutdown and whatnot. So I wouldn't want to say that you can't do that, but maybe a guideline that you shouldn't require it. Like you shouldn't not run if you can't import that, right?
So the thing I struggle with stuff like that is, sort of the philosophy of OpenStack has been, if we don't test it, it doesn't work. And so like having a dictate of like, your project needs to like hello world under not UWSGI, but then not having like the resources in DevStack to test it and stuff seems a little rough. Like I appreciate the idea of like best effort, like that's good, but like we got to be really careful about saying, like we support things running under not UWSGI if literally 90% of the tests that run on that project are run under UWSGI. I know with like an operator hat on, I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable to assume that a clean DevStack pass using UWSGI would translate to like a similarly configured environment with another WSGI server working properly in my production environment.
Yeah, but I mean, that's true. I think that there are lots of things that we can't get full coverage on, especially when it comes to like operating systems and hardware. And we have best effort testing guidelines already with like CentOS and stuff, which we sometimes can't make work. The UWSGI thing, the UWSGI module is really like should be really confined. Like you don't use that in your database layer. You really just use it in your runner to schedule a thing that gets run on graceful shutdown and that kind of stuff. So it's not. I mean, I agree with you that if it's not tested, it doesn't work. But
So what do we want to test for? Go ahead, Dimitri.
Yeah. Just about that. I think we just need to be clear about what we guarantee. We are not guaranteeing that your WSGI server will work fine. We are guaranteeing you that the WSGI application that we provide and the middlewares that we provide work with this, not with this and that, but like we tested them. We tested the applications, we tested the middlewares. We can guarantee you that if you use a WSGI server, it will work. If you use other features than that,
well, I mean, I think that's what Jay is saying, though, that if we test under one and it has special features, it's hard to prove that you're not using those and break. And that's certainly true. Although functional testing doesn't have that module, so hopefully you're functionally testing your code such that you work without that. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like just not doing anything from where we are now is no worse than where we are now, and I don't want to like blow this up just because of the UWSGI, the revelation that UWSGI is in maintenance mode need not blow up a whole bunch of other issues, I think, about like, well, do we codify the WSGI server or do we not, or whatever. So I guess I would rather wait until we have a problem. And this is not a problem, in my opinion, yet.
The most tricky thing, from my opinion, in this maintenance mode, that they say that they will do the security patching and stuff like that, but they were not saying they're going to support new Python versions. For example, they do support 3.11 as of today, or well, at least they test it in CI, but they tested against Ubuntu 18.04. So I mean, I'm not sure for how long, without some investment in development, it can take. And latest patch has been merged in the beginning of January, and they're pretty much of pull request passing. And I mean, I looked through some of them and they look quite good for me, but they were never kind of reviewed. So I mean, we shouldn't. I mean, we should probably keep. I mean, keep track on that and see where where it will end, because I don't want us to be blocked by USGI in case we want to use newer Python version, for example.
Well, no,
And if you want to bump,
obviously, if Python 3.12 doesn't work under USGI and nobody shows up to fix it, then we have a problem, and that would be something to resolve. I think I guess I just have faith in the extremely wide deployed base of UWSGI that it will get the community maintenance that it needs for the foreseeable future. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But I guess at this point, I'm just not like, there are lots of projects that I use that the latest commit is much older than January, and
no, but I mean, there are a lot
Yes,
of things going on, but but I agree in general. I'm just saying that, we probably should just, not put it on site and check from time to time, from release to release, probably what state is in. So we won't find ourselves, at last moment that we should switch or change something globally for projects. So
Amy has a raised hand. Please go ahead.
Would it make sense to say no new features be created using that Python module? Would that make sense? Because it sounds like that is very specific, whereas the other stuff is more portable. Just a thought.
well, you don't really create features with it. I mean, it's like there's certainly nothing externally visible to the user that would be dependent on that module. It's like I don't know. It's like your.
But if the module went away tomorrow, would your stuff break?
Well, I mean, that's a different question, I think, than features. You mean no new uses of the module?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I don't really see the benefit of doing that until we have an expectation that it's going to go away. Like, it's just like the module is for like what things do get run in my service if you're going to terminate me and restart me. Like, there's no reason not to use that as long as we expect it is there, because it would be like, not having cleanup routines and stuff. It's not the.
But you're currently using it. What I'm saying is, Glance shouldn't decide next week that they want to use it for something else when we think it may be going away. Why compound the problem down the road if we don't have to? If we can just make a recommendation saying, don't do this.
Actually, it's Glance that is using it, but sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Can I quickly interject? I actually looked at this because I figured a small amount of technical information might get us out of the theoretical and into the reality. According to the UWSGI Python module documentation, you get an import error if you import the UWSGI module and your service is not running under UWSGI. So any sort of simple test, which is going to just make sure that it compiles, is going to make sure that it should work sanely under uWSGI because that means the code works without uWSGI, which I think means if you're using functional tests that aren't running under uWSGI, we might just already be covered.
Well, this is what I said earlier. Like you just the fact of loading your file is part of your functional tests. It means that you're not hitting it. Like it's a module that's not distributed anywhere. It's passed to you in memory basically when you're loaded under uWSGI. So you have to support it not being there in your functional tests, or you're not even loading that Python file. So yes, I agree with you.
Okay, so it sounds like we're already covered.
I do remember that ModWSGI didn't have good support for chunked content requests a few years prior, and Glance was using those. I'm not sure what the state is right now with regards to chunked encoding.
A few years ago, Glance did not support running under WSGI at all. Okay. It only supported standalone. So that may have been one of the reasons. I'm not sure, but.
So regarding chunking and Glance, when the problem starts is when you attempt to use Glance client instead of OpenStack client. And unfortunate part is that Heat still uses Glance client. So basically, if you're running USGI on Glance and you use Heat and you also run in steps, and things kind of broken. But it's probably not Glance issue on its own, but more our goal to move everyone to OpenStack is the key.
Cool. So I guess our agreement is that we continue with uWSGI. We do not make any sort of trying to fix things before they're broken. uWSGI is still being maintained at some level as of now. So there is no reason to rock the boat. Moving forward, the next topic is discussion of ad guidelines about naming versions of the OpenStack projects. We discussed this extensively last week. I don't know if we want to keep discussing it in this meeting, but I do know that we should vote on the proposal and have the discussion there for now. Whether the motion fails or passes, it should fail or pass on the merits of the patch request.
To have it said right before the meeting, I've pushed alternative proposal.
Cool, yeah, makes sense.
To make things more complicated.
Well, I think that Sylvain said something about that when it was suggested in the other patch, which I agree with, which is that moving the Nova version that is not very symbolic to be in the forefront is not very palatable to me. I certainly agree that if we have to do something, that your proposal is better than the alternative, but
sure, please.
Nova 27
please.
Is not some.
Yeah, it's just
makes sense.
My goal is to make sure that for Ironic specifically, but for PTLs in general, that they have the freedom to refer to their project as something that's separate as well as something that's integrated, because many projects have those two separate identities in a way, and it's not meant to be like a slide or anything. I mean, the integrated release is the coolest thing that OpenStack comes up with. It's just Ironic also has something that's maybe a little bit different than that as well. And in some contexts, I just wanted the freedom as PTL to be able to refer to it as such. There's no grand plan. I don't have some sort of PR waiting somewhere to remove OpenStack for everything. It's just simply a matter of wanting to not worry about if I write a blog post for ironicbaremetal.org, if I'm going to upset anyone, if I mention an ironic version without saying OpenStack 2023.1 beforehand. That's honestly the entire thing that I was thinking about. And it's part of the reason why I was sort of caught off guard when it came off so controversial, because I figured there must have been, I may have come across and presented it in a more hostile way than was intended. And that's, that's the case. I apologize for that. But my goal is just to make sure that in the few contexts where it might make sense, that a PTL doesn't have to worry about if they've, said things in exactly the right way. And I mean, I think it's obvious, even from the last conversation, that in general, I prefer an approach to the technical committee where we don't dictate as much stuff and we leave more of the power to the individual projects. And so that's just a reflection of that. And if folks don't agree, that's fine. It can be voted down, but don't think there's some sort of deeper, larger plan here. There's not. It's just a desire to want to maintain that freedom.
Yeah, just to clarify my humble opinion. My humble opinion is that I don't think that Nova 27.0.0 really helps a lot of people, but the PTL. I mean, I would rather prefer that instead of having two different numbers for saying a specific OpenStack release, if both the project and OpenStack would use the same version number to say, like, okay, I'm currently running this version of Nova, which is basically the same that Glance, which is basically the same than Neutron. Maybe it will be also simpler for operators to know, okay, cool.
It would definitely be simpler.
So instead of, I mean, that's why I said -1. It was not because of your point. It was more like I would rather prefer for at least Nova. I mean, me being the PTL saying, I would rather prefer to have like the same version in between Nova, Glance, Neutron for release. That's just my point.
So going back to what Jay said, I think that the document here is specifically about OpenStack docs and release guidelines or release notes, and has nothing to do with you writing a blog post anywhere else. So maybe we need to call that out. It seems obvious to me that that's what we're referencing here, but if not, maybe we can just clarify that, like, you're not violating any trademark policy in any countries by using ironic 17.
Well,
but
I mean, we don't set trademark policies. So that's another place we got to be careful.
Just trying to, come on.
It does say specifically, and I'm happy to lower the scope of my patch to only be for the stanza, that project specific documentation uses the version of project combined with the release with the OpenStack 2023.1 parentheses. So it does say that project specific documentation needs to use that notation. And quite frankly, I don't know where that line is. All the documentation we publish for Ironic goes on docs.openstack.org. The only extra place we have is the marketing site, which the foundation manages for us. And I mean, we're literally like PRing markdown files. That's all we ever do to update the blog there. So that was the more concerning piece to me. And if it would make folks more comfortable with approving that, if I limited the scope of my change simply to the project specific documentation section, I'm willing to do that.
Well, no, the project specific documentation is very specifically things that I think are in scope for needing to be that. I'm talking about blog posts not on docs.openstack.org, which I thought is what your example was. So
yeah, I like the Dimitri idea also, but not so Slevin. What was the main concern on having the project version at the first? I mean, I'm okay with like doing it either way, first project or second OpenStack, but the important thing is the consistency. Whatever we define it as a consistent way for all the projects.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, Dan.
Yeah, I just was going to say, the consistency is definitely the important part to me, and the consistency that all the projects do it the same way, and that the release number is the thing that provides that thread of consistency through them, right? So that Like if we were to drop that number and always only say Nova 27, Cinder 19, Ironic 52, that drops. That's consistent in its format, but not consistent in the which of these line up with each other thing. And both of those bits of consistency are important to me.
OpenStack release is not consistent because independent projects do not have OpenStack release.
Sure, I'm talking about the people that line up on the release, which cycle with RC and cycle with intermediary are the projects I'm talking about. Yeah.
But yeah, again, we are also saying, yeah, I wrote it all in commit message. But if we are talking about release notes and we mandate to put OpenStack version first, then it's really becomes unreadable because you have like all release notes for like for minor versions or for bug fix versions, all prepared with OpenStack release, which doesn't make really sense because main information is difference between major release or what bugs were fixed somewhere, and we are kind of putting that aside. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So Dmitry, I actually looked at your alternative, and honestly, from another point of view, I would rather prefer, that's what I said not in the chat, but in the channel. I would rather say, I would prefer, at least for my release notes, to say the OpenStack Nova 23.1 release does this and that, instead of saying like the OpenStack 23.1 Nova something, or rather like the Nova, then OpenStack blah, blah, blah. I mean, for me, it's simpler to say the OpenStack Nova 23.1 release does that and this, because at least I guess for most of the operators that use Nova, they don't even know about the number that Nova has.
No, but how are you going to address this in release notes for specific bug fix or minor versions? Because at least Nova has quite some versions for each release, right? So whenever there is some bug fix backported or something like that, you do bug fix release, but
I
how
know,
you're going to address?
I know, and I had like a comment saying that I would rather prefer. I know about Semver, but
2023.0.1 is a Semver compatible versioning scheme that we could move all the projects to.
That's my point. That's what I said.
So
we cannot do this because it's against PEP.
No,
so
we
cannot add another number after.
No, that's not what I said. 2023.0.1 is a Semver compatible, PEP 440 compatible version number.
No.
Yes, it is.
Yes, Jay.
I verified it.
If we're talking about changing the version numbers again, can we talk about that separately? Just because I think that's a whole different ball of wax. The concern that I have, and Dmitry did a really good job of raising this, is especially like we talk about consistency, but there's not necessarily consistency. And Dan alluded to that when he said that we're talking about cycle with the intermediary and cycle with RC projects. In the case of Ironic, we may perform up to 3 releases per OpenStack cycle that are consumed by various downstream folks. We don't always do that, but sometimes we do. And in this change, it would be that they would all be under, the OpenStack 2023.1 for all the ones pulled during the Antelope cycle. And so I do think there's potential there for a little bit of confusion, as Dmitry said, when you go look up release notes for OpenStack 2023.1, you're going to have to scroll through for the specific Ironic version you're running in that case, which might be a bug fix release. We do maintain multiple different ones of those. And so that's sort of where I land, is that 2023.1 is like a tag. It's like we're saying that this release is a part of this group of releases, but it's not really a version. And I think trying to treat it as a version is where some of this confusion comes in, right? Ironic is part of OpenStack 2023.1 release, but we have out in the wild at least 2 different versions that could be affiliated with that once our final release is done, because we have an earlier bug fix release we did in the cycle, which would be listed in the release notes for this as well as this. So I appreciate trying to have consistency in naming, but we don't necessarily have consistency across the projects. And so when we try to force consistency in the wording we use, when the projects aren't consistent, we are giving up fidelity. And I don't want to give up that fidelity for Ironic. I mean, if I get outvoted, I get outvoted, but that is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're an operator trying to figure out what versions of Cinder and Nova were tested along with any of those Ironic releases that came in the middle, that still provides you that common thread, right? I mean, it's like, it's still a very useful thing, even though Ironic is different in this regard. Like, it still provides that that coherency amongst all of those releases for what like Nova and Cinder and Keystone were part of our bag of testing. So I don't see like that doesn't, and even like last week when I was looking at the way your docs are right now, you still tag, I mean, tag is not the right word, you still associate those intermediate releases with like the Antelope, or the whatever the thing is right now. Like, so it seems to me like that is consistent, and it does provide a consistency that an operator, they might want to roll their Ironic a little bit forward, but they need to know which of those things were all tested together.
Yeah, and today, and you'll notice if I look at some of the previous patch sets, you'll see I took this approach initially, and it got sort of shot down a little bit. So I've been trying to shift to like find a spot of agreement that originally I was referring to them as a part of the OpenStack 2023.1 series, which is how it says in the Ironic right now. If you go to Ironic release notes for Zed, the top line says Ironic Zed series release notes, or it says Zed series release notes. It may not even have Ironic up there.
Yeah.
And then beneath that, it has Ironic, and then the specific version number of Ironic we're talking about, and the release notes associated with that.
Right.
I just think it could be potentially confusing to our users to have a second number up there. But it's, I mean, you're hitting it where like, I'm splitting a hair here, and I am. I'm admitting I am, and that's part of the reason why I'm like, it's fine if people don't want to vote for this. I just, I think we do have to consider the fact, or I would prefer that we consider the fact that there are, that we do have projects such as Ironic that have an integrated identity and an independent identity kind of simultaneously, and like, we're proud of both of them, right? Like, it's not a slight against the integrated. The integrated release is awesome, but we also have this other thing too. So I'm trying to balance those two sets of users. Maybe I'm not doing it in the best way, but that's what my goal is.
So I want to time box this to here, because we can keep talking about this forever. It also feels like this problem started entirely when we moved to version numbers rather than code names. I don't think anyone disagreed on calling things by Antelope or Bobcat or Zed or Yoga. But once you start having two version numbers, then there is a lot of potential for confusion, which we did not.
I don't think it's version number related.
Yeah,
right? That's a good question. I mean, for Jay, because I'm really having trouble understanding like the whole import of all this. So if we were sticking with just like Antelope, would you have that same issue? You would not want to mention Antelope on your documentation?
Sticking with Antelope, we wouldn't have passed a policy that dictates to PTLs exactly how to refer to them in the release notes of their project. Like,
even though they were already doing
that. It was OpenStack, right? When we were discussing the numbering versus name, I mean, that was part of it that came up, was we wanted a standard way. So it would be, this would read OpenStack Antelope, whatever, Nova 27.
I wasn't here for those discussions. So like, I've read some of the endpoints, but I don't necessarily know the journey y'all went on to get there.
Yeah, but I guess, so if we just had stuck with Antelope and just said, everybody should say in your documentation, OpenStack Antelope, Ironic 22 or whatever, would that still be a problem? Is it the number?
And to be clear, they were doing that already. It's just that they don't want to be told to do that, I think.
We didn't say, if you go right now, we don't, it doesn't say, hold on, I'm gonna open this up. I'm not gonna trust my memory, but we need to time box this. It was said to time box.
Yeah.
I'll paste a link in there and put a message, but I mean, I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, vote against me. You're not gonna hurt my feelings if you vote against me. This is the approach I'm taking. I wanted folks to know what the motivation was, that there's not some sort of secret plan to like, you know, I don't have like a PR waiting to get reviewed to remove OpenStack from all of our docs. There's nothing like that. It was just a matter of trying to find a balance between that consistency and the freedom of the PTL to refer to things the way they thought best. If y'all disagree, you can disagree, and that's fine. That's why there's 9 of us instead of 1 of us.
Okay, so there's only 2 minutes left. I am bumping the remaining items for next week, starting with the OOO deprecation process. Briefly on that, I saw that there were no volunteers on the mail about maintaining Z, so that's unfortunate. We should try a bit harder on that regard. And also, please look at the open patches for review. Thank you, Jay, for volunteering for vice chair. I'm not entirely sure on the process for that and when I can merge that patch. Do I have to wait for a few days or for it to get an approval?
I think
G-Man has more input.
Yeah, I think it's just chair choice, but if you want, like, you can call if anyone else also wanted to volunteer. But again, it will be a chair choice to choose between them. So now, like in this meeting, we know vice chair nomination or kind of a volunteerness is open. So if, say, by tomorrow or day after tomorrow, someone is not raising hand, then we just merge with the J patch.
Okay, makes sense. And yep, thanks for bearing with me on my first meeting. Things will get better, I hope. I'll see you all next week, and thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you, Christine, for running.
Thank you.